So today has been years in the making. In just 2 hours, so-called Doomsday Mom and convicted killer Lori Vallow Daybell will be sentenced for the crimes she committed here in Arizona. She has been found guilty on 2 counts of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder.
This is a case I-Team investigator Erica Stapleton has been following since the beginning of this. I mean, this case has taken twists and turns. She joins us live outside the Superior Courthouse right now. It's still behind us. We talked to you at, in the 6 o'clock hour. Erica, we can still see people lined up behind you. They've been there, you said, since yesterday, waiting to get into this courtroom.
Yeah, Justin, Allison, good morning. A lot of these people have been out here all for several hours at this point, some coming yesterday, and all to get a look again at Lori Vallow Daybell. This is probably going to be one of the last times we actually get to see her in a courtroom. Of course, she's already been convicted in Idaho for killing her children, Tylee and JJ, and for her role in the death of Tammy Daybell. She was sentenced to life in prison in that state, but then extradited here to Arizona for 2 more murder conspiracy cases. She's been convicted in both of those for conspiring to kill her former husband, Charles Vallow, who died in 2019, and for conspiring to kill her niece's ex-husband, Brandon Boudreaux, who survived a shooting attempt. And a lot of different people in line here today, including some of the former jurors on her cases from Idaho to Arizona. I want to bring in now Tosh Reed Tucker. You were a juror on the case where she was convicted of conspiring to kill Charles Vallow, her former husband. Why did you find it to be important to be here today?
Just to kind of get a look at the rest of it. Like, to get to be a part of this has been insane. So keeping up with it was pretty important to me.
Now, going into the case, this happened earlier this year, the jury was not supposed to know anything about her background, her history in Idaho, the deaths of her children, her murder convictions. What was it like for you to go through that process of sitting in on a jury and then learning all of the dark, doomsday, horrific, heinous details in all of this?
So we were aware it was a high profile, but going into it not knowing anything, you don't know it's like that high profile. So coming out of it and finding everything out has just been a whirlwind.
Is there something that stands out to you the most now that you've been able to kind of process your experience and learn about the case? And I know the second trial in Arizona where she was convicted of conspiring to kill Brandon Boudreaux, you were able to sit in on that for a few days to kind of see the other side of court proceedings when you're not a juror. What stands out to you the most about this entire case?
That it's repeated, and she's gone about it the same way every time. She has someone else do it for her while she helps.
And that said, you got to see her represent herself in these cases. We've seen her demeanor look different when the jury's in the courtroom. We've seen her get really testy with the judge. What are you going to be looking for today? What are you expecting from her demeanor? She's never apologized. She's never taken responsibility for her multiple convictions from Idaho to Arizona. What are your expectations when you see her today?
I think kind of similar to what it's been the whole time, smirking, not really taking it seriously, and yeah.
And I'll ask you the same question about the judge. You got to see Judge Boreski, do his thing in the courtroom when you were a juror, and then you were able to see how she kind of interacted with him, how she would fight with him, pick fights, and kind of have this attitude. What are you expecting from him today? Do you think he's going to be really harsh on her?
I think so. I think everything that he's been through with her, I think he is, yeah.
All right. Well, Tosh, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you being here. And Tosh is one of the people who has to wait in line to get inside today. As I mentioned, guys, there are more than 24 people waiting right now, and we're expecting that number to grow. As for expectations for sentencings today, again, she's going to be sentenced for both of those murder conspiracy cases here in Arizona under Arizona state law. If you have been found guilty of murder conspiracy, first degree, the life, or you have to have a life sentence, possibility of parole after, or possibility of release, I should say, after 25 years. However, that is not possible for Lori Vallow Daybell, because once she is sentenced here in Arizona, she will be extradited back to Idaho, where she will continue serving her life sentences there. So certainly a long and arduous process to get to this point. We are expecting to hear from multiple victims today, those who are victims' loved ones, giving their impact statements in the courtroom before the judge hands out those sentences for those crimes here in Arizona. But a lot of eyes are going to be on this. It'll be really, I'm personally very curious to hear how the judge is going to speak to her after. I've been in sentencings in Judge Bresky's courtroom before, and he usually, kind of pontificates on his experience with the case and what he thinks. So I'm very curious to see what he may have to say to her, especially because they have been, sort of at odds in the courtroom. At one point, Vallow Daybell tried to get him kicked off the case. So she certainly tried to throw everything at the wall as she's represented herself, but got her nowhere. And this is the result. She's going to spend the rest of her life in prison.
Yeah. Erica, well, you said that, she tried to get the judge kicked out, and then the judge got mad at her one time, kicked her out. It's just been a lot of back and forth. But I find it fascinating from that juror, because I know one thing that we have been talking about in the newsroom is you're a juror, and you do not know her background. You don't know that, the convictions that she had in Idaho, and just you get done with the case, and then you find out, oh my gosh.
You learn how big the web is of all of these connections
here. Right, so that's fascinating that you talk to the juror to get that perspective.
Well, and I will add, guys, that there is another juror here I saw in line. He was on the case in Idaho. He wound up being an alternate juror. So it shows that, it's not just the people who are affected in the case, the criminal cases, the direct people who have lost loved ones, who have had to, endure these trials year after year, but people who are part of the trials take this with them too. There's a lot of traumatic details that come up in these cases. There are some horrible photos. I know up in Idaho, her case, there were, the jury was shown autopsy photos from her children and Tammy Daybell. So it's certainly very disturbing, and I think there's something to be said about jurors providing that civic duty. And I know Tosh, I have done interviews with them before. They've said that people have thanked them for their service and finding Lori Vallow Daybell guilty in the cases here in Arizona. So it's really a crucial part of our justice system.
Right, and while many of the eyes are on the two murder convictions she has in Idaho regarding her two kids, Tylee and JJ, it really all started here, right, with Charles Vallow, her fourth ex-husband, who ended up being killed by her brother, Alex Cox, who called 911 and says he shot Vallow in self-defense. And then what they believe is that Cox shot at Brandon Boudreaux, Lori Vallow Daybell's niece's ex-husband here, before these murders happened in Idaho regarding Tammy Daybell, JJ, and Tylee. So going back to all of this, because Alex Cox, in a stunning twist, also ended up dying, which the medical examiner found of natural causes. But Erica, I want to ask you about Brandon Boudreaux, because he is the only person who is still alive of these victims here. Do we expect to hear him or address Lori in court today?
Yes, Allison, we do. I actually sat down with Brandon earlier this week, and he's very much looking forward to putting this behind him. He's very forward focused. He said, he was kind of quiet throughout this process, although in helping investigators piece everything together. He testified in Idaho, and he's kind of had to take a step back from the spotlight, I would say. Not that he wanted to be in there, but the Idaho trials had to unfold first, and then the trial for Charles Vallow's death came second here in Arizona. And then it was finally time for his murder conspiracy case to go to court. He testified in his own case. He talked about having to be cross-examined by Lori Vallow Daybell, how it's not an experience he would wish on anybody, but he did it because he could. As you said, Allison, he is these lone survivor in all of these cases, because all of the other victims that Lori Vallow Daybell has convicted or has been convicted in either murdering or having a role in the murder of, they are all dead, including her children, Tylee and JJ, Tammy Daybell, her current husband, Chad Daybell's first wife, and Charles Vallow, her former husband. And you pointed out a bit, Allison, but Charles, this all did start to unfold in Arizona, and Charles actually, he warned police. He said, my wife is having some of these dark beliefs. I'm worried for what she's going to do to me. She's threatened to murder me, and I'm worried about what she's going to do to our children. And I don't think anyone could have envisioned that all of that would happen actually. And it's seriously quite disturbing. But Brandon is expected to be here today, and a lot of his family members are also going to be speaking, giving impact statements, he said, to the judge to help with that sentence there. Again, the sentence not much of a surprise. It's supposed to be a life sentence here, but I think on paper it'll be really important for the victims of these cases and their loved ones to have those sentences here in Arizona. And I should mention, guys, too, I know we've talked about Chad Daybell and we've talked about Alex Cox. Chad Daybell was not charged in any of the cases in Arizona, but he is believed to be a co-conspirator. As you said, Allison, Alex Cox died of natural causes in December 2019 before charges were filed in this case, but he's believed to be a co-conspirator, too. And then I will add very quickly, I know we could talk about this for a while, but Brandon Boudreaux's ex-wife also named as a co-conspirator in his murder attempt. She has never been charged. Her attorney said, they do not have a comment based on what came out during his trial, where the prosecutor was very clear that she was a co-conspirator. So we understand from Gilbert Police that the case is still open. So maybe there's something more there. But at this point in time, this is where things stand now. It's Lori Vallow Daybell convicted for these crimes and set to be sentenced this morning.
It's just insane, the amount of twists and turns, the people involved in this,
Right.
That's all involved.
And that will continue to happen today after her sentencing is handed down and she is moved to Idaho to serve more life sentences there. And interesting that we have heard a little bit from Lori Vallow Daybell, just in terms of, what you've observed in court, but also she gave an interview to NBC's Dateline's Keith Morrison, sitting down with him and still showing no remorse, saying she believes she will be exonerated. And as you mentioned, that this all kind of ties to some dark religious beliefs, that she believes her children are now eternally free, that people had turned dark who needed to be taken care of, and so very difficult to hear some of the details coming out of where the mind went, and unfortunately all the victims who ended up in the wake of all of this. Really tough. Erica.
Absolutely. And Allison.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Well, okay, I know we could talk about this for a while, but what you just said, kind of the dark religious beliefs, it honestly takes me back to her sentencing in Idaho about 2 years ago to the day where she was first sentenced to life in prison for killing her children and her role in the death of Tammy Daybell. And the judge in that case, this was really the first time we got to hear from her in court. She did not represent herself in Idaho. She had public defenders there. And at her sentencing, we kind of heard this twisted religious diatribe. And the judge in that case, he said to her after, it's obvious you are still deep down a religious rabbit hole, essentially, still deep down in that delusion. So I think that's really the core of all of this. And in those few interviews she's given, I know you mentioned Dateline, Allison, I think that comes through loud and clear. But no, she's also never taken any responsibility for convictions or apologized. And I'll be curious to see how she behaves in court today.
Right, to see if that changes from Idaho to those convictions, these new convictions here in Arizona.
All right, our Erica Stapleton live out there outside the courthouse. She's going to be in there. Our coverage does not stop, though, because starting at 8:30 right here on 12 Plus, we're going to be live streaming the sentencing. We're going to have extended coverage as that hearing ramps up, then the hearing after it. But we're going to have a legal expert in here with us, just really walking us through the case, because like you were saying, it started here, it just unfolded.
Right.
Those
children reported missing from here when they hadn't seen them, and just so many